Hello, Year 5 and 6, it's me, Mr. A, back with story time, and we're going to start Chapter 8 of Oversea Under Stone by Susan Cooper. And remember, Simon just escaped from the boy, courtesy of Great Uncle Merry in his car, so let's see what happens in Chapter 8. "But how did you know where to come?" Simon said, as Great Uncle Merry changed gear noisily at the foot of the hill up to the grey house. "I didn't really, I was just driving around the village hoping I should find you. I left as soon as Jane and Barney came tumbling back into the house. Poor mites, they were in a dreadful state. They rushed into the drawing room and grabbed me bodily. Your parents were rather amused. They seemed to think we were playing some great private game." Great Uncle Merry smiled grimly. "Gosh, it was lucky you chose that road to drive along," Simon said. "I've never been so glad to see anybody in my life." "Well, you must remember I know Trewiswick. When the children said they hadn't been able to find you on the path back to the house, I knew there was only one way you could have gone. You came out into Pentreath Lane, didn't you?" "There was a lane," Simon said, "all shut in by trees. I didn't really have time to see what it was called." Great Uncle Merry chuckled. "No, I dare say not. Anyway, I grabbed on your turning out of that lane onto the main Tregony Road, which in fact you did. Good job you didn't go the other way." "Why?" Simon said, remembering the blind choice he had made in the lane, with the boy scrambling over the stile behind him. "In the other direction that lane is a dead end. It leads up to Pentreath Farm, if you can call it a farm. It's been hopelessly neglected for years. Mrs. Polk's no-good brother lives there, young Bill Hoover's father. So does the boy himself when he bothers to go home, which I gather isn't very often. But on the whole, it wouldn't have been a very healthy place for you to run to." "Golly!" Simon felt cold at the thought. "Well, never mind, you didn't anyway." Great Uncle Merry stopped the car with a rattle and a roar and heaved at the handbrake. "Here we are, safe home. Now you run along in and clean yourself up before your mother sees you. There's some friend of hers come to supper, luckily, so she'll be shut up in the drawing room. Out you get, I'll put the car away. And Simon..." Simon, halfway out of the door with the manuscript clutched to his breast, paused and looked back. He could only just see Great Uncle Merry's face, his ruffled white hair turned to a dark tangle by the shadow, and light from a street lamp up the hill reflecting eerily back to make his eyes two glinting points in the dark. "It was very well done," Great Uncle Merry said quietly. Simon said nothing, but slammed the door, feeling suddenly more grown up than he had ever done before. And when the car had coughed on up the hill, he forgot all his weariness and crossed the road, holding his back very straight. Jane and Barney were at the door before he had one foot on the step. They hustled him inside and towards the stairs. "Did he catch you? You've still got it. Oh, well done. We thought you'd get beaten up." This was Barney, wide-eyed and solemn. "You didn't get hurt, did you? What happened?" Jane ran her eyes critically over Simon like a doctor. "I'm all right." There was a sudden bright streak of light in the hall as the drawing-room door opened. Mother called over a murmur of voices from inside. "Is that you, children?" "Yes," Jane called across the banisters. "Supper's nearly ready, don't be long. Come straight down when you've washed." "All right, Mother." The door closed again. "They're all talking like anything in there," Jane said to Simon. "Mother and Father met some long-lost friend in the harbour, and it turns out she lives in Penzance. I think she paints too. She's staying to supper. She seems quite nice." "Did he chase you for miles?" "Hundreds of miles," Simon said. He yawned. "Hundreds and hundreds. And then Great Uncle Merry turned up just when I was going to get caught." "We sent him out after you," Barney said eagerly. They went on up the stairs. "We didn't send him," Jane said reprovingly. "He went. Like a rocket as soon as he heard what had happened." "Well, he wouldn't have gone if we hadn't told him, and then Simon wouldn't have got rescued." Barney was glowing with excitement. He would have given his ears to have been the hero of the chase. "We didn't know which way you'd gone. We tailed Miss Withers for a bit, but she just went down the headland and sat on the grass at the bottom, looking out at the sea." His voice rose. "So we rushed home, and Great Uncle Merry was just back from fishing. We were jolly glad to see you getting out of the car," he added unexpectedly. "Not half as glad as me." Simon yawned again, and rubbed his forehead. "I do feel mucky. It must have been when I hid in those bushes. Come on, I can tell you while I wash." First they were too busy eating to talk, and then towards the end of supper too busy trying not to fall asleep. So all three children were grateful that Miss Hatherton was there. She was a small, bright, bouncy person, quite old, with cropped grey hair and twinkling eyes. She was a sculptress, a famous one. Great Uncle Mary told him afterwards, and had taught Mother when she was a student of art school. She also seemed to have a passion for catching sharks, and at the supper table she alternated between enthusiastic discussions of art with Mother and fishing with Father. The children listened with interest, but were relieved when Mrs. Polk brought the coffee in, and Mother, who had not missed their yawns, sent them to bed. "Nothing like Cornish air to send you to sleep," Miss Hatherton said cheerfully as they pushed back their chairs and said good night. "If any of these follows in your footsteps," she added to Mother, "it'll be that one." She pointed disconcertingly at Barney. Barney blinked at her. "What do you want to do when you grow up, young man?" she asked him. "I'm going to be a fisherman," Barney said promptly, "with a big boat, like the White Heather." Miss Hatherton roared with laughter. "You tell me that in 10 years' time," she said, "and I shall be very surprised. Good night. I'll buy your first picture." "She's dotty," Barney said when they went upstairs. "I don't want to be a painter." "Never mind," Simon said. "She's nice. Don't go, Jane. Come in our room for a minute. I think Gummery's coming up." He made a sort of face at me as I closed the door. They waited, and in a few minutes Great Uncle Merry appeared in the doorway. "I can't stay for more than a minute," he said. "I am engaged in the beginnings of what promises to be a long and heated discussion with Miss Hatherton and your mother over the relative merits of Caravaggio and Salvator Rosa." "Cool," said Barney. "As you say, Barnabas, cool. I rather think I'm out of my class with those two, however." "Gummery, we've found it," Jane said eagerly. "We've found the second step, and we've started properly now. It's one of the standing stones on Kamare Head. The boys did it between them, really," she added honestly. "Come on, Simon, get the manuscript out." Simon got up and retrieved the telescope case, grubbier and more battered now than it had been, from the top of the wardrobe. They laid the scroll out on the bed and showed Great Uncle Merry the rock where it had all begun, and the small rough sketch of the sun, and how they had worked their way to the standing stone. "But we can't tell which standing stone it is on the map," Simon said, "because they don't look the same here as they actually do on the headland." They all bent over the drawing that they still could not help calling a map. Great Uncle Merry looked at it in silence. "Gummery," Jane said tentatively, an idea that she could not quite grasp beginning to chase about her brain. "Would he have done the whole thing on the same system, do you think?" "Whatever do you mean?" Simon said, bouncing flat on his back on the bed. "Well, you remember when we were trying to work out the first bit, and I said that it ought to be the way all treasure maps start, 6 paces to the east or something, and you said no, it might be done by getting one thing in line with another as a sort of pointer." Well, does that mean you have to get everything in line with something else at every step? Are all the clues going to be the same kind of clue?" "You mean next we shall have to get something else in line with the standing stone?" Great Uncle Merry was still gazing down at the map. "It's possible. What makes you think so?" "That," Jane said. She pointed at the map. Everyone peered. "Well, I can't see anything," Barney said querulously. "Look there, over the end of Kamare Head." "But that's just another one of those blodges," Simon said in disgust. "How can that mean anything?" "Doesn't it remind you of something else?" "No," Simon said. He lay back again and yawned. Great Uncle Merry looked from one to the other and smiled to himself. "Oh, really," Jane said, exasperated. "I know you've done jolly well today, and I know you're tired, but honestly—" "I'm listening," Barney said at her elbow. "What about the blodge?" "It's not a blodge at all," Jane said. "At least I don't think so. It's a bit smudged, but it's a circle, a properly drawn one, and I think it means something. It looks just like the other one, the one over the standing stones that turned out to be the setting sun." Simon propped himself up on his elbows and began to take an interest again. Jane went on, thinking aloud. "The way the first clue worked, we had to find the stone that was in line with the sun and the rock we started from, and then we had to go to the stone and check that it was the right one by the shadow. Well, perhaps now we have to do the same thing. Find something that's in line with the stone, then go to it and see if its shadow points back to the stone." Great Uncle Merry said softly, "The signs that wax and wane but do not die." Jane turned to him eagerly. "That's it. That's what he said, isn't it, in the manuscript? There must be all sorts of clues in the writing, as well as in the drawing. Only they're even more buried and we don't know how to get to them." "This shadow business," Simon said doubtfully. "Couldn't it be simpler than the way you just said? Perhaps all we have to do is find out what the shadow of our standing stone points at." "But it points back at the place we started," Barney said. because he didn't use it as his first clue. His first clue was, look and see what's between you and the setting sun. The shadow was just just our way of proving it. Well, it doesn't have to be a shadow made by the setting sun this time. But that's where my blodge comes in, Jane said. Well, perhaps it's the rising sun, Barney said. Only it can't be, it isn't in the right place. No, Simon said, of course it isn't, it's just a blodge. Jane spluttered with impatience and glared at him. Oh, why does it have to be the sun at all? Great Uncle Merry was still sitting silent and statuesque on the end of the bed. He said again lovingly to himself, the signs that wax and wane but do not die. Simon gazed at him blankly. Have you figured it out yet? Yeah, me too. Don't you see? Jane almost howled at him. It isn't the sun, it's the moon. Simon's face began to change like the sky on a windy day, different expressions chasing one another across it. He looked from Jane to the map to Great Uncle Merry. Gomery, he said accusingly, I believe you knew all the time. Is she right? Great Uncle Merry stood up. The bed creaked as he rose, and his height seemed to fill the room. The light swinging from the ceiling behind his head cast his face into shadow and brought back once more to all three of them the old sense of mystery. His great dark figure, with a mist of light faintly silver around his head, left them silent and awed. This is your quest, he said. You must find the way every time yourselves. I am the guardian, no more. I can take no part and give you no help, beyond guarding you all the way. He turned slightly so the light shone on his face, and then his voice was ordinary again. I imagine you'll need some guarding at the next stage too. You know what it is now, don't you? Simon said slowly, we have to find which way the shadow of the standing stone points at night, under the moon. Barney said matter of fact, the full moon. The full moon? Jane's blodge. He drew it round, not crescent-shaped, so it must mean the full moon. Well, what's it like now? You are not going up on the headland to look at the moon tonight, Great Uncle Merry said firmly. No, I didn't really mean that. I don't think I could manage it anyway, Simon said, stifling another yawn. I wondered whether the moon was full or not now. We should have to wait for ages if it were all thin and new. It's full tonight, Jane said. I could see it shining in through my bedroom window, so that means it will be almost as bright tomorrow. Would that do, Gomery? I mean, could we go and look tomorrow night? Before their great uncle could answer, Simon was sitting up again, looking thoughtful. There's one thing wrong with all this. If we've got a moon that's only just past full, then we've got all the light we ought to have. But the moon changes, doesn't it? I mean, it rises and sets at different times and in different places according to the time of year. Well, we're in August now, but how do we know that the Cornishman wasn't working out his clues in the middle of January or April or something, when the moon wouldn't look the same as it does to us? You're just being awkward, Barney said. No, said Great Uncle Merry, he's right. But I will say... He won't say anything, so he'll say it tomorrow. Right, he won't say anything now, he's going to say it tomorrow. So we'll leave that there, and we'll catch up with them tomorrow. Or is it tomorrow? No, Monday. We'll do that. So in the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Take care, everybody, and have a great day. Bye-bye.